to go, David? Cool. Hello. Thanks for being patient with us here. Sorry, we had some issues with the live stream, but we're all up and running now. So thank you for being here tonight. Welcome to React Denver. We have two great talks for you. Excited to have everyone here. We've got a really great turnout and kind of a new configuration with the room and the chairs, but we're working through all that. And yeah, like I said, kind of a late start, but appreciate you bearing with us. A couple things before we get started, just some housekeeping stuff. If you haven't already taken advantage of the food here, please grab some, make sure you get some salad, some pizza. Feel free to do that before the speakers start, but once that happens, we ask that you refrain until the break. We will have a break between the first and second talks. And then as it relates to restrooms, there are gender-neutral restrooms just across the way, and then there are gender-specific restrooms around the bank of elevators. So if you need help with that, come ask us. If you need suggestions on where to find them, I mean. Yeah. Moving on, I don't want to linger on that one too long, but a huge thank you to our sponsors this month. We wouldn't be able to do that or do this meetup without having the support of companies like Gusto, who is the event sponsor for the month, and then as always, our sponsors, Turing and Salt. They kind of help us cover the costs of certainly, providing this space here, and then the cost of our meetup membership too, which is not free, unfortunately. But a huge thank you to them and to Gusto for sponsoring all the food and drinks tonight. David works for them, and they've been a terrific supporter of us, and I know a number of other meetups here in Denver, so thanks to them. And as always, thank you to our supporters on Open Collective as well. This is the platform we use really to manage all of the donations we receive, even in managing the sponsorships that we get. All of that is on Open Collective and transparent there. So if you want to see what we spend our money on, you can go check that out. Or if you want to donate, even better. So thank you to our supporters on Open Collective. And I want to give a quick moment for anybody who's hiring. If you're hiring, hopefully you have the job posted up here, but do you want to say anything? If you're hiring, please raise your hand. Would love to have you say a few words. Yeah.
I'm James Spivey with Shutterstock. I got my team over here, Michelle and Aaron. We are hiring a bunch of different roles, mostly React-based. We also have an internship program coming up for the summer for those still interning. That is a paid internship. So reach out to any one of us and we can give you some details and help you get applied.
Thank you. Anyone else? I did have somebody stop by from, I think, Well Data Labs, and she wasn't able to stick around, but she did leave her cards up here. So if you're looking for, looks like a senior-related job in React, or senior-level job, then feel free to reach out to her. And then the company I work for, Salt, we are also hiring, looking for both back-end and front-end. So we're kind of a Node React on, using TypeScript is sort of our stack. But we work with cryptocurrency if that interests you at all, and you want more information, feel free to come talk to me after the event. Or I'm also on Denver Dev, so I put my handle up there. Feel free to ping me there. Moving on from hiring, unless anybody else has something. No? Any announcements? I think there might be a couple. Another meetup one. Nick?
Hey everybody, my name is Nick and I am one of the organizers of Jamstack Denver. What is the Jamstack? We're all about JavaScript APIs and markup and how we can deliver a super modern client experience. Fun fact, both of the speakers tonight have spoken at Jamstack Denver. We meet on the first Wednesday of every month, and you can find us on the Twitter at Jamstack Denver.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Anything going on? You want to shout out? No? Okay, cool. Well, that brings us to our first talk. Doug has spoken here many times before, and we are honored to have him here again, especially on a topic that I personally think doesn't get enough attention. and is a really, really valuable skill whenever I see it in the workplace. So if you could please give a round of applause to Doug and welcome him down here.
Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. So my talk tonight is effective code review. As Sam kind of mentioned, I think it's an area that is somewhat overlooked in the process. Something that I think we all strive to do. It's a little harder to do well. As he mentioned, my name is Doug Whitney. At the time that I was putting this together, I was lead UI engineer for a startup called Signal Frame. And technically, I still am for the rest of the week, but we learned last week that we are not getting another round of funding. So if you are looking for data scientists or platform engineers or UI developers, I know some really good people that you should talk to. So just a quick show of hands, who has taken part in a code review process? And leave your hand up if you have ever felt uncomfortable opening a PR or been uncomfortable reviewing someone else's code, or if you have ever taken PR feedback personally. I know, I definitely have. So that covers a lot of people in the room. And the goal of my talk is to get you thinking about your code review process and how it can work for you. I'm definitely not an expert on this subject, but I have taken part in a lot of code reviews on various teams. Some teams that did it very well, some that did not, some teams that really didn't see a need for code review as part of the process. Those can be difficult, but I have had the chance to see what works well, what doesn't, and that's kind of where I'm starting from here. This is just showing where I spend my time in GitHub, and you can see a fair amount of that is in code review. The reasons for doing code review, I think, are pretty straightforward. Results in just better output, builds alignment within your teams. Like, this all looks great, so why don't we just all do this and just move on with it, right? It turns out that it's harder to do well, in part because, you know, as humans, when you have an opportunity to give someone feedback, the easiest route is to just not do that and just kind of defer on that, let somebody else deal with it. You don't have to stake out a position or really say how you feel about things. You can just kind of move on with your life, right? So what we'll cover tonight is what effective review looks like, how to get there, and where things can go wrong. Most of this is in the context of an engineering team inside of a product organization. If you're talking about an open source project, for instance, the dynamics are going to be slightly different. So starting with what effective review looks like, we're going to kind of start from the end by looking at the output and work backwards to how to do these things. But these are things that I think you could observe by either watching a team work together in real time or looking at the artifacts of the review process, right? The things that you would find in GitHub, PRs, the comments that happen on those, and just the discussion that takes place there. So the first thing that I think you typically see is a predictable cadence. What you're looking for here is that pull requests, PRs, are being opened and reviewed and merged. The pace, the speed with which this happens is not as important as the fact that it's just happening on a regular rhythm. And this is a good indicator of how things are going kind of around the actual development work, right? So if stories are not being broken down small enough, or if someone is just off in the weeds and stuck, you will definitely see that in code review, right? Or lack of PRs being opened. And we have other tools to check status on these things like stand-up meetings, and those are great, but people tend to be optimistic, right? In worst case, maybe people are hiding that they're having problems and hoping that they can kind of work themselves out of that. But you will definitely see that, in the code review process, whether or not it comes across in the kind of daily check-ins. The other thing that you will see is feedback that is objective and hopefully constructive. This is probably the hardest part. Obviously, giving feedback or accepting feedback graciously is not an easy skill, and it takes a high level of trust between a team to do that well. Again, probably the hardest piece in all of this. The other thing that you will see is participation. And this is really kind of looking at who is taking part. Ideally, code review is peer-based. It shouldn't matter whether the request is coming from a senior developer or a junior developer. Anyone should feel comfortable commenting on that and offering feedback. And right, it shouldn't be a downhill kind of thing where only the experienced or more senior people are doing code review. It does happen, but it works better when everyone is involved in that process. And also, in terms of participation, sometimes code review just becomes this rubber stamp process where someone just puts eyes on it and moves on without really doing a thorough review. Not great, right? I mean, you can operate that way, but you're missing the benefits. So we'll just go through these in order a bit and talk about if you are looking to improve in these areas, how you can do these things. So first, we'll talk about setting a cadence. If you are not already in the process of kind of having these ongoing conversations with your team, do that first, right? Like, don't try to solve everything through the funnel of code review. You should be having conversations outside of that process to lay the groundwork. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made, but you don't need to decide all at once, right? You can iterate on this. Again, it's an ongoing conversation, but there are a lot of things that can be contentious if you haven't talked about them, or if, again, like a senior or lead person is kind of imposing their personal preference because no one else has an opinion. That can work, but you're not going to have a team that feels like it has buy-in. Automation, right, is kind of just table stakes at this point, something that we all try to do as much as possible. The example I think of, I worked on a team where everyone on the team used VS Code and had an extension that formatted code for us. We had one developer who just refused to do that, and every time he opened a PR, we had to remind him to go back and format his code. Just like, not worth anyone's time. Just don't do those things if you can avoid them, right? Focus on the more interesting domain problems and the reason that you're working on these things. Review should also never be a blocker. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. I know I have, where either as the requester or someone on the team, you see someone open a PR, they ask for someone to take a look, and it just kind of languishes there in the code review lane or whatever you have. And that, again, just does not serve you well, right? There's kind of a small shift in mindset that you should be working your board from right to left. It's pull versus push. You want to focus on the things that are closest to completion. And that does not, that does not mean that when someone opens a pull request that everybody stops what they're doing and pounces on that. It just means keep things moving, and when pull requests are opened, hopefully someone is available to give that attention. This is always a question that comes up, and there is some research around this, which I've linked here, just about how large a good diff should be, and these are some good guidelines to work within. When you go beyond these, not only do the detection of defects start to drop dramatically, but reviewers just don't do a good job in general and start to stop caring about what they're reading. It just is, there's that point where things have diminishing returns. The other thing they found was that authors who annotate their own PRs have fewer defects, and the thought there is just because you're having to almost act as a reviewer of your own code, you will find things that you might not otherwise. There are alternatives to whatever your chosen tooling is, if that's GitHub or something like that. Don't be confined to that tool. Some alternatives here. Scheduled review sessions work really well when you have a new team that is ramping up or working together on a project for the first time, or if you just need to kind of realign people. And this can be everybody in a room together, or screen share if you have remote employees. But it can help accelerate things if the normal review process is just not working correctly or is getting bogged down. Same for just over-the-shoulder kind of ad hoc review if you work with your teammates sitting next to you, for instance. And pairing kind of has the same effect in that you're accelerating the review process, you're bringing other people in earlier in the cycle. So this is my secret weapon, and I hope if any of this is useful that it will be this. It's really simple, but really powerful as well. Just using work in process pull requests. And there are a number of reasons why this is helpful. But in the teams where I have worked this way and we have implemented this, it has a specific meaning, right? The PR is obviously not ready for feedback, but if you want to see what is coming, feel free to get a preview. The way that we've indicated that in the past is either with a prefix like you see here or a label on the PR itself. The reason that this is important is, one, teammates can get a preview of what you're working on, and it also works great for people who block out some time each day to do review. They don't need to wait until you have completed this piece of work and decided to share it with everybody. They can kind of do some incremental review as you are making changes and see how things are progressing. It also shortens the review cycle once you are ready for feedback, again, because people have seen what you're working on. And if necessary, you can request some targeted feedback, right? You can ask for maybe a particular person on your team to look at a portion of the code or push a fix directly to your branch if you need some help. And then for the broader team, it gives insight into just ongoing progress. Your manager can see what you're working on and doesn't need to be constantly checking with you because it's obvious that there are things happening. The most important piece, though, is that it just kind of lowers the stakes for everyone involved by enabling this incremental feedback. As a requester, I don't have to make everything perfect and kind of batch my work up before I release it to the world, right? I'm asking people to take a look at it as it's in process. And as a reviewer, I know that I'm not going to be bogged down spending an hour reviewing this code when someone needs to merge it in because I've had the chance to look at it as it's being developed. So ideally, once you start to build a cadence, you can review, merge, and iterate. Ideally, you don't block unless you really need to. And if for some reason you're not able to effectively get into a rhythm, consider smaller deliverables, whether that, again, is breaking stories down into smaller pieces or using feature branches or even feature flags where you can ship things incomplete and still make incremental progress. Those are things to consider. So, objective feedback. I don't know, maybe you guys can think of examples, but I can't think of a lot of professions where you are asked to give direct and continuous feedback to your peers, just as an ongoing part of the process. And it's not always comfortable, like we saw when we were talking at the beginning about where people kind of have some hesitation into getting into this process. I think what helps, like all of these things just generally come down to empathy for your teammates and putting yourself in their shoes. It helps to read a lot of code to uncover, patterns that you see over and over again, maybe things that don't fit your sensibilities or your kind of preferred aesthetic, but understanding different approaches to solve the same problems. And just, give people the benefit of the doubt as well. You've got to separate the work and the person in the process of addressing feedback. On the flip side of accepting feedback, same thing, right? Just be open-minded, realize that the people who are reviewing your code are probably doing so with good intent. Maybe things come across in a way that seems personal, but step back, look at it from a different perspective and see if maybe there's something there that you need to reconsider. This is something I constantly remind myself of too, right? There are cases where objective feedback can feel personal, and it is really easy to tie your kind of own self-worth up into the code that you're delivering. Just remind you again that you are not your code, and you will throw things away that you have been really proud to build and start over and learn from the iteration. So, encouraging participation. A lot of this is just letting your team know what is expected. Again, who takes part? Hopefully it's everybody, not all at the same time on every PR, but over time everyone should be engaged in this process. Talk about things like, again, how long should you spend? How do we prioritize this relative to other work? In most cases, it should be, again, high priority. You want to focus on things that are closest to completion, and by definition, if it's in review, it is pretty close to being complete. So as a requester, again, give context for what you're working on. If you are working on user interface, maybe provide some screenshots, link back to the original ticket. Whatever you can do to give the reviewer context about what you're delivering is going to shorten the time that they need to spend kind of pulling all the pieces together. And explicitly ask for review. Don't just open a PR and then wait for people to come to you. And then finally, you don't have to do everything that someone suggests in a PR, hopefully. Hopefully that is part of your culture, that the reviews are mainly suggestions, and you as the developer have some autonomy to decide what you address now, what you address later. But at a minimum, you should acknowledge whatever feedback and suggestions are being made so that people don't stop trying to, contribute to what you're doing there. And then on the flip side, I think it is helpful to block out time for review, especially if you can incorporate the work in process pull requests. It's important to have a culture where you can ask questions and where people know they're not going to be ridiculed for not knowing everything. It just is the quickest way to shut down discussion, right? I mean, I'm sure you've all seen it. We've all experienced that. And then, your goal as a reviewer is not to prevent bad code from going in. Maybe it is, but, I would suggest, again, like a slight shift in mindset in that your goal is to improve the code that is going in. There's a link I'll share at the end, but it talks about how you should try to improve a pull request one letter grade. And it's kind of an interesting concept because none of us work in perfect, pristine code bases as much as we might like to. But if what you're reviewing works and has room for improvement, consider just iterating on that as you go. Your review does not have to be the final last word on this code, right? You'll get a chance to revisit it at some point in the future, hopefully. And then as a team, right, accepting that everything is not going to be perfect, you're going to iterate, you're going to collaborate, just sets you up for much more success down the road. One of the things that I have experienced on a couple of teams is situations, again, where stories are not broken down well and everything is kind of stacked up to end at the same time that the sprint ends. And what happens in those cases is everyone is working on their stories as you get right up to the end of the sprint. And not only do you have tons of conflicts and problems merging everything in, but no one is available to do code review because they're all trying to finish their stories. So just, again, break things down, stagger things, smaller deliverables. And take the opportunity to celebrate where you can. There are times where you are working on very difficult problems that take a long time to solve, many iterations. So just as a team, take the opportunity to make this part of it fun and enjoyable. And on the other hand, if you have someone who is just off in the weeds and struggling, take them aside and take that offline. Code review is not the place to call somebody out and kind of point out the mistakes that they're making. Final word kind of on participation. Create a code review lane if necessary on your board. I don't think I've worked in a team that has done this, but it can be helpful just to have that visibility. There are also tools to automate assignment of code review, but hopefully it doesn't feel like a chore and people are, again, trying to help move things through the process. So where things can go wrong, it's usually not one thing. It's typically kind of some overlap between a couple of these. But the one that I want to point out here is what I'm calling the negative feedback loop. And you may see this when a developer has maybe opened a large pull request and gotten a ton of feedback, things that they should change, that other people have requested that they change. And the way that people sometimes react to this is by withdrawing a bit, trying to make their work, perfect before they deliver it or share it. And this is a reinforcing loop where I've spent a lot of time on this work. It's not great. I need to justify the time that I've put into it, so I need to really make it something special by the time that I deliver it. And so you just keep kind of digging in further and further without making progress. If you see somebody doing this, right, this is something that just needs to be addressed. And of course, any kind of personal feedback. If it is truly directed at the person, someone needs to address that as well. So circling back, effective review should help facilitate getting PRs to be mergeable. And it should uncover few surprises because you're having these conversations as a team, and it is going to help you move forward with fewer conflicts. And as developers, we don't just produce code. Nobody orders 5,000 lines of Python and 3,000 lines of JavaScript. We create value where it didn't exist before. And code review is one of those areas where you can create value for not only the dev team, but the broader organization and your customers as well. And if you do it well, it makes work fun, right? Because you know what is expected of you, you get to see the impact of what you're delivering, and you're not constantly being thwarted when you're trying to contribute to this product that you're building. Just a quick checklist. There are lots of variations on this, and I'm sure there are other things that you could add here. You don't have to do all of them every time. Depends on the size and the scope of the PR, but just a helpful place to start. A couple of resources that I used if you want more information, and that is all I have. Sure, if we have time.
Any questions for Doug? I'll bring the mic. Let's start with Dewey here.
One of the things that you alluded to in some of the stuff you had up there was the workflow process. You mentioned sprints, and then you also had what looked more like a Kanban flow. Which one would you advocate? And I'm assuming by lane you meant the column specific for code review rather than a swim lane for it that goes across the board.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, for clarifying that.
So which of those two workflow methodologies would you prefer to see used?
I think it depends on your team and your company. So I came from a startup where it was very much Kanban and just pulling things forward. But obviously, if you have tighter integration between product and development, I think sprints can work better in those cases. Depends.
Other questions?
Yeah, so I really like that thing you were showing with whip. Did you actually just tag the pull request with that, or did you actually change the name of the? I'm curious if you changed the name of the.
We on my current team, we put a prefix at the front of the name.
Okay.
Just makes it clear.
Yeah, the one thing I'm a software engineer who was in consulting for a lot of years, and I used a lot of automated tools to go rip through very large code bases where I didn't have a lot of time to, learn. I didn't hear you talk about that at all, like using things like Sonar or some of these other tools that can actually go in and find and sort of impose a standard. You know what I mean? And the real big thing I learned, and you hit on it right away, was you are not your code. That's real important, especially when you're coming in as a consultant who's going to find mistakes and just explain, like, once you check that code in, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the company or the organization you're working with. And I found, like, the biggest thing about code review in the years that I've done it or been had it inflicted upon me is it's actually a very good learning tool for all the members of the team, and I believe that everyone, if they have time, should be doing code reviews, because you'll learn new ways of doing things, or you'll be able to help somebody out because you've experienced that problem, and the organization grows because now it's not one person who's the genius; it's this hive mind thing that goes around code reviews.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point too. I don't think you always have to have feedback in order to do code review. Often just reading and seeing what's going in is sufficient too.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I had two questions. First, thank you for the talk. My first question was, I was wondering, can you share your slide deck?
Yeah, I think it will be up on the comments. If not, I'll post it.
Perfect. And then my second question was, so for example, on GitHub, you can define pull request templates that outlines, or whatever you could put, some default text in the pull request. I was curious if you had any thoughts on utilizing something like that.
I forgot that was a feature. I have been on a team where we did that. I think it's helpful. Sometimes you just feel obligated to fill out all of the template and it doesn't apply, but I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on how to give effective feedback on a pull request on a topic or a language that you are unfamiliar with or by far less than an expert in?
Take it as an opportunity to ask questions and make it a learning review for yourself. Sometimes you're just confirming your own understanding. Sometimes you need more clarity around the approach someone is taking. So I think that's fair.
Any other questions? Cool. Well, thanks so much to Doug. Let's give him a round of applause. Cut out here. My mic cut out there for a sec, but let's just take a quick break. We'll do like 3 to 5 minutes. If you want to come co-organizers of the Jamstack meetup. If you haven't had a chance to check out their meetup, I really encourage you to do so. They meet the first Wednesday of every month. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and I have not attended myself, so I'm not actually going to pretend like I know what the meetup is, but knowing Nick, myself, and now Zach, I'm sure it's a great event, and maybe I'll see you at the next one. But I've heard great things about it, and I hope to get out there soon. So, but Nick so graciously pointed Zach in our direction. Sometimes it is difficult to find speakers for a monthly meetup, and so I'm using this as a long-winded way to ask you to speak at a future meetup. We love having other meetup organizers, but we're also looking for new faces and people that we don't normally have speak. So if you are interested in giving a talk at some point in the near future, or even 8 months out, feel free to talk to David, Diana, myself, or anybody else part of the team, even the Jamstack guys. I'm sure they would love to have you talk at their meetup too. We really appreciate that. So with that said, I think we have a lot to learn here about Tina, the CMS, and yeah, really happy to welcome Zach here. So please give him a round of applause.
Thanks for the intro, Sam. Let me know if I'm too loud on. It sounds like the mic be a little hot, and I'm usually on the AV side of things, so I'm usually listening instead of speaking. But yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Zach Brooks, part of the Jamstack Denver meetup, and today I want to talk about an open source toolkit that I started to learn about, and more recently I found like it could be I believe it's a new trend and a new way to kind of build static sites and build upon the way that we look at content and how we manage it with CMS tools. So we'll get into that. And to clarify, Tina is actually not a CMS, but I will explain why in a bit. But quick facts about me first. So I'm a big metal fan. I love music. Some of my favorite bands up there, Periphery, Between the Buried and Me. If there's any other metal fans or metalheads out there, I'd love to chat with you about it. I have a cat. She can be very photogenic like this, so I was very proud of that photo she let me take of her. And then she does things like this. I love that bottom right photo because it looks like she's doing a paint me like one of your French cats pose. And I love open source, which is kind of one of the draws I found with Tina. I love that communities can come together and create some really awesome tools available for others to use and contribute to. So my favorite development tools and projects come from open source like OBS, which they're using to broadcast all this. Darktable, which is an open source photo editing tool, which is kind of a competitor to the Adobe software. Gridsum, which is kind of the Vue version of Gatsby, which I use for my personal site. And then Vue.js, the framework as well, which I use on a daily basis at work, and I've grown to love it more and more. And of course, Tina CMS, which let's get into it. So when I first gave this talk, I admit I didn't entirely know what Tina CMS stood for. And after chatting with some of the Tina core team, Scott Gallant, who was kind of the brain behind it, I learned that TINA is actually a recursive acronym. So it actually stands for TINA is not a CMS, which it's kind of, you'll start to learn why they refer to it as that. And they also picked a llama because they thought the mascot would be fun and playful, which is what they kind of thought TINA was. It described TINA well, and then, of course, the Napoleon Dynamite reference was kind of like blatantly obvious, so that was just a bonus for them. But anyway, what is TINA? Well, it was first announced and launched back at Jamstack Conf, San Francisco 2018. If you want to see the announcement video from Scott Gallant, the CEO of Forestry.io, which is the company that's kind of launching and where part of the core team is based out of. It's a Git-backed CMS, or Forestry is a Git-based CMS platform, and you can go watch his little video as he introduced it to everyone at Jamstack Conf. And what they aim to do with TINA is create a way for content editors to work with hot reloading on a site, as in live editing for your site's content locally in a dev environment or with their TINA team's cloud-based solution that they're working on right now. They aim to be this middle ground of a CMS platform and site builders like Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress. So kind of those like kind of plug-in, drop-in component features, things like that. So what I want to focus on in this talk is the functionality of TINA, some of the core concepts they use, and how it actually adds live editing to your site. And we'll actually see like how some of the things you can do with it. And I'll also conclude with kind of my thoughts on where I think this project can go in the near future. So, yeah, as we kind of, we've dropped the word Jamstack a lot already, and Nick kind of gave us a little introduction to it. And it seems it's always a hot topic on Twitter. I think every week I see a kind of a post about how people really don't like the term Jamstack. And there's also like some things of like people trying to probe like, has anyone really done this for a site? And but I think it's starting to kind of take hold and give us some new looks at not only how we build static sites, but just how we actually use this term Jamstack that we keep throwing around. And then there's even a really cool post I saw by Jamie Bradley called Managing Diabetes with Jamstack, the idea. And it kind of went into how he's taking the principles and the methodology behind Jamstack to apply to other things other than just static sites, which, kind of to lean back into TINA here, is what I think TINA is going to try and help change that perspective. At the same time, Jamstack and TINA may not fit every case where a CMS is needed, but I think this TINA can be used for some really cool things given enough time and the development behind it. And I kind of wanted to continue things with this quote from Scott Gallant of why they kind of launched TINA in the first place. So he says, quote, "The CMS editing experience hasn't changed much in the last decade. Essentially, every CMS is a customizable collection of web forms. On the other hand, the editing experiences of DIY tools like Squarespace, Wix, Medium, Webflow, and Cargo have become much more sophisticated. TINA is our way of laying the foundation of what will be the future of content editing. Our goal with TINA is to launch early, gauge interest, and watch the community grow. If it meets our expectations, we'll likely build it into the roadmap of Forestry.io, and someday you may have the option to edit your Forestry site with TINA." So to me, it seems like they're trying to take the best experience for both developers and content editors and drive other ways to manage content in general, and kind of rethink how it's done. Kind of like how Sanity's kind of making you rethink of like the whole structured content piece, which is why I think the open source is a really interesting approach to this project, kind of allowing the community to get their hands on with this tool early, kind of start testing it out with different features, see what works, what doesn't, and try to get those features implemented in the core tool. So, and again, I'm just going to briefly kind of go a little bit more into Jamstack since we keep throwing that term around. As Nick said a little bit earlier, Jamstack is an acronym for JavaScript APIs and Markup, and it's a web development methodology based on client-side JavaScript, reusable APIs, and pre-built markup, hence the term Jam. So for JavaScript, you would either have some sort of framework that's based with React or Vue, so like a Gatsby, Nux, Next, or you can even just base it off of just a flat create React app. And the core part of Jamstack is that it doesn't rely on a web server to render content. So server-side operations are abstracted into reusable APIs and accessed over client-side requests with JavaScript. And then third-party services you can utilize third-party services or create your own custom functions. So things like Azure Functions, AWS Lambdas, headless CMSs, that's the API piece of it. And then the markup is how your site is served with static HTML files, which those would be like Markdown or JSON or even YAML files. So, and I kind of wanted to, I've already kind of touched on it, but I wanted to clarify again that Jamstack is not just static site generators. I feel like that's kind of the hot take everyone kind of goes with. But I mean, Gatsby even has a thing called hybrid pages to allow you to have more dynamic functionality. So Jamstack is not really an architecture. It's more of how you build your site and a methodology behind it, not really the tools you're using necessarily. So I just wanted to touch on that and kind of clarify Jamstack since I've been throwing that term around a lot. So Tina, exactly as I've already mentioned, open source toolkit to add live editing and hot reloading to currently React-based sites. On their roadmap, they're eventually going to add different frameworks, so Vue's definitely on their list, Gridsome, one I've already mentioned, and Nuxt. But right now, Gatsby and Next are the two big ones, and then base React sites. Again, it's built in the Jamstack, ready for Jamstack tools, and backed by Git. And again, not a CMS. It's a plugin and a toolkit for our JavaScript framework sites. So how does it exactly work? So the key piece is real-time feedback. So the diagram up here, we kind of have the way it works. So you got your content source, Tina sitting in the middle, and then your generated site coming out to your users. So it's going to take your static site structured content, such as Markdown files, and process them to HTML files. While Tina sits in the middle of this, it's going to expose all that content into form fields with the browser plugin to allow you to process and edit that content on with the live tool. So this is going to give your editors live feedback and like the ability to see what they're editing on the page and how it's going to look. And I'll go into that a little bit more with the demo later on of just how you can actually do that. And then at the same time, it's going to give the developers precise control over which pieces of that are going to be editable. So, still giving the developers experience, but still making your content editors happy that may not be as technically savvy, but still want a lot of features in their hands. So it's still kind of almost retaining the concept of a CMS in terms of like editing it, but it's kind of taking that into the next level with the live feedback approach. And then the cool part is all the changes are saved to the original source file. So whether that be somewhere out in a headless CMS or just locally in your Git repo, it can automatically push updates to that Git repo, or you can save them for later so you don't have to automatically worry about changes going to production or something. So I'm going to go into some more of the core concepts that they use. So the first is the little sidebar. This is the main kind of core tool behind Tina. So this is what's going to display the currently present Markdown file or whatever piece of content you're editing and show you all of the fields available to it. It also allows you to configure into the site settings for like global styling or like themes you may have. And of course, you can hide this in production with a simple environment variable, so you're not having anyone going and editing your content in production. So, like I said, it exposes your site's content to be editable. Based on these two screenshots here, that the one on the right is your global site config that you may have, and then the menu would show you some of the options you have. So if you wanted to go and edit your homepage or see what other options you have there, you can go and do that. And like I said, it's going to allow you to directly edit whatever piece of content you're looking at, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, I changed the about page. I didn't actually mean to do that. I wanted to look at what the homepage looked like here. So, and one thing cool that you can do with the field spaces, you can create your own custom fields with right now with React components and utilize React hooks as well. So you can have, say, something like a video uploader or some sort of audio manager that may not be in the default Tina tools. And then to carry on from that, we got fields, which a form's just made up of many fields. And they could be, like I said, predefined fields, like simple text areas, text fields, images, markdown, or you can get a little more complicated with custom fields. And you can even add some like validation or some other functionality to those. And then the last two of the pieces of the core concepts are backend and plugins. So the backend, that's where your content's going to live and where it's going to be sourced from. So if you have a headless CMS, it would be that. If you're just using a Git backend, it would be that. One thing to note is Git backends are the only ones currently supported by Tina. They give you the ability to kind of hook it up to your own if you need to right now, but it's kind of like one of those features they're working on in the roadmap. They're definitely trying to get like their core functionality down solid. And then the plugins piece, that's kind of where the community is going to come in to allow you to extend the functionality of Tina. And then you'll be able to add those to your own configs. So let's jump into some of the code real quick. Get out of here. Change my desktop. All right, so let's this. All right, so we're gonna start with the Gatsby config to kind of show the showcase the what plugins are being used. So this. Oh yeah. Oops, not Zoom. I always forget the command on this. That's right. There we go. That good? More? Less? So I should specify this is one of the Tina starters they give you. It is a Gatsby blog site. I know I said that Jamstack and stuff could be used more in blogs, but this is the simplest example to show Tina in work right now. But the three core pieces that I'm going to be utilizing here is the Tina CMS Git. That's the plugin that allows you to it's going to contact your Git repo and make the changes. There's a lot of settings you can do with that. So you could have like a default email and like what the commit name for it. Tina CMS remark, that's going to handle all the markdown files and how to transform them and such. And then JSON does the same thing as the remark plugin, but it handles JSON files. And then your sidebar, those are just some options you have for how it looks and things. So you can either overlay it on top of your content or displace. I have it set to displace, which I believe is the default setting. And then, of course, that production environment. You could even have like a testing environment if you really didn't want anyone to test it. You just want it in development. So let's go into this layout. So this is the main layout page. Main layout page for the site. And if we scroll down a little bit, so this create post plugin, this is actually going to allow you to add additional forms within Tina, and it's just kind of specifying some of the default forms you need. It'll create a file with. So in this case, I'm using title and an author email field, which I'll kind of go into a second. The file name, so it's going to slugify that into, since this is going to be a blog post, since, of course, this is a blog site. And then it'll just return that form out to us. And then I'm going to jump into this custom field, which is my email field. So it's just a styled component here it's got my field description. And I should specify this is a custom field within the Tina UI that I've created here. So that author email is going to be reading from this value. And it even has some validation that I've built on it, which I thought I had that open. Oh, right, that's in actually Gatsby browser. So this is where you would actually add those custom fields to your Tina options. So, and I added my validation here, so it's a regex to make sure the validation or the email inputted actually makes sense. So then let's actually jump into a blog post form, but actually before that, I'm gonna jump. So this is the site running currently. We can zoom in there. So let's open up the little Tina plugin. So just some basic site info we got here. We open up a post. So we got this. I'm going to get out of this author bio. This is like a generated thing for them of like, this is reused across all blog posts. And then if I go into here, this is where we're actually seeing all of our content. So if I wanted to say, yeah, we'll do it live at React Denver. So it's already updated the UI for me. I haven't saved it. And then if we go into our markdown file here, it's already made those changes for us. And it has a pending change in my Git repo. So now if I wanted to say, oh yeah, that looks good, let's go ahead and save that, it just committed to my Git repo. So we want to go back to that blog post layout. Let's say, okay, we do actually want to show the author's email now. So I'm going to comment this. So this is essentially a template component, and we got a blog post form. So this is going to define what fields are available for this type of post, and what kind of data they're going to be saved to when we want to query that with GraphQL. So this raw front matter email, author email is where that email value is going to go, and we're going to make sure that we query it. That and make sure it's actually displayed in our blog post UI. If we get that in there. So this one already had an author context saved, but now we have the email field available. So that's pretty cool. Now, let's say another cool feature about Tina that I really like is the ability to do inline editing, which I think is really powerful. And it's as simple as including this Tina wrapper around the specific piece of content you want edited. In this case, this is my main post's HTML, so the main content of the page. And then it uses a couple things. So it uses, if I uncomment these, and comment the other remark form, which is getting exported out. We got the live remark form, which we're going to use, the WYSIWYG, which allows the inline editing, and then the Tina field to wrap it all around it so it can actually generate a form that can be editable. And then the delete, I should specify, the delete action just allows you to delete that type of this type of content. So if you have blog posts you don't want anymore, it'll just let you edit it from the Tina UI and delete it from your repo. And then if I come down, we got, so the remark form, that's the one we were using before. It's going to be reading from that blog post template, which is what we were seeing, and the form, so we know what fields are available for that to be editable. So if I change this to a live remark form now, we got this little edit button, which you can kind of style and place wherever you want. But now if I enter it, now I'm doing just inline editing. And you can you could hot swap images in there. You can just allow your editors to see what exactly they're changing, how it's going to look, and make sure it matches up with exactly what they're intending to do. So we're just going to say done, sure. Oop. Whoa. I've seen this happen before. I thought I got around it. Why are you not present? I'm not sure what it's complaining about exactly. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about that right now. More or less, the preview would just close the editing tool, and you would unfortunately still have to go in and click save from the Tina UI. That's just one of the downsides right now. They're working on allowing inline editing and saving as well. So that's more or less what I wanted to show with the demo, just kind of showing Tina in action. That's still very early on in its development, but it's starting to get some cool new features. Like the further along it gets, the more I see how it's starting to grow. So let's go back here. I got a couple more slides. All right. So again, some of my final thoughts. I really think this could be the future of content management. It definitely kind of shows at least a new way to kind of look at it and kind of give a little bit more power than just filling out fields in just a basic UI for editors. It's nice to see that things actually happening right in front of you. And since I just used a simple email field for that for a custom component, but I imagine you could even do some really more sophisticated things if you needed to. Maybe you have like, I don't know, some sort of complicated spreadsheet you could somehow make get working with like a plugin or build your own component to handle that. I think that could be something really cool. I really think it can be used more than just a blog site. Again, I kind of use that as a simple example. It's just kind of the easiest way to start to understand how Tina is working, kind of get your feet wet with it. And yeah, I'm really starting to like it the more I start to see with it. And I actually saw that someone was able to get it working with like a POC that they were going to just show off to their one of their clients. So it's cool to see that people are actually like, jumping onto this and starting to grow a little bit more with it. So yeah, if you're interested in Tina, you're kind of like what I see and want to help out with it, you can do so by going to tinacms.org. The docs and their contributing guidelines of how to either write a plugin or like help out with documentation or even like solve bugs. Like they have a lot of, here's a simple first issue you can go and fix. And also, if you have any ideas of like, oh, it'd be cool to see this, like I encourage you to jump on like the tinacms.org's Slack channel. And like all the teams are really nice. They're really responsive. Like, oh, hey, it'd be cool to see this. And they're like, oh yeah, we can definitely like look into that. Or even encourage you if like, hey, if you're comfortable trying to do this, you can go and do it yourself. Not to like spread out the work amongst the community, but that's also kind of the point of the open source project. So, and yeah, so thanks for your time. Again, the tinacms.org docs, that's primarily what I use to put this talk together. I'm on Twitter at Zacanon with a 0, Denver Devs at Zach Brooks if you ever want to chat. Like I said, my personal site, and I'm starting to put a blog together, so put more content out there. And again, Jamstack Denver, we'd love to have you out or give a talk there. So. Yeah.
Any questions for Zach? Yeah, let me bring the mic to you.
Hey, thanks for the talk, Zach. So the plugins you showed in the editor, it kind of reminded me of WordPress plugins and
yeah, a little bit
that how they're integrated. So my question was, with the backend piece, can Jamstack be integrated with a really popular CMS like WordPress, or are the backends usually built more customized?
Right now, I know WordPress is definitely on their radar. They kind of they do have an official roadmap out of like here's the core features they're working on, and I know more sophisticated backends like WordPress is definitely on the radar. I actually saw a message today of someone's like, hey, what's the status of this? So that's definitely high on their priority. But to my knowledge, I haven't worked with anything like WordPress integrating with this. So I know it's definitely on their radar, though, so I can imagine something like that could definitely be coming soon.
Other questions for Zach? Yep.
Are there any special steps you have to take to deploy this in terms of like setting it up with the, do you have to have a hosted Git repo that it links into, or does it
no,
create its own?
No, if you just have, like, you could even deploy this to Nullify if you really wanted to. It doesn't have any special requirements around that. If you have, it really would depend on like how your CMS is built. If it's again another service that's not like a Git-based one right now, that would be tied to the repo. So.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, let's give Zach one last round of applause. Thanks so much, Zach. That was great.